Today, we have a story about a wife who is secretly planning to cheat on her husband. Let's dive in. Jackson, our protagonist, had just returned home earlier than expected from a Saturday golf game. He recognized the voice of his wife's friend, Becky, or Beck as she was known among her friends. He looked through the open patio door and saw his wife, Diana, and her 3 friends lounging by the pool, sipping mimosas. Diana was lying on a sun lounger with her back to the door. Beck was to her right. Redhead Steph was directly in front of her, and Cheryl was to her left, lying on a towel by the pool. Beck said, "Sorry, but that's all I can think about. I felt it, and I can't stop thinking about how I would feel." Diana replied, "You all talk about it. Besides, I'll be careful so Jackson won't find out. I won't be like Candace." Candace, their friend, was known for her endless stories of seduction and incredible nights. However, her husband always found out. Beck, who had been divorced for 3 years, warned Diana, "He will know. They always find out. You know what happened to me and Candace. She became my downfall, and now she will become yours." Diana, however, was determined. "It will be one time, and that's it. I need to know if size really matters, like Candace says." Cheryl added, "That's not true. In college, I had an affair with a guy, but after the initial passion, he was just another guy who didn't want anything else other than intimacy." Steph, who had never been married, warned Diana, "The biggest problem you have is that you've started an affair with this guy. Whether you know it or not, you're dating him." Diana, however, was only interested in the thrill. "I'm not dating him. We drink, dance, and have a little fun. Until last night, when he told me that he has great dignity and wants to have a night with me. Until last night, I behaved well. But now that I've held it in my hands, I want to know what it feels like." Beck sat down and leaned against Diana. "Understand, sister. Candace doesn't get her incredible every night. She sits at home, lonely, just like me. And that's where you're heading." Listening to this conversation, Jackson was overcome with anger. His wife of more than 20 years was planning to cheat on him with some guy she met at a club. In a fit of rage, he pushed the screen door aside, knocking it off the railing, and rushed towards the pool. Diana felt his hand grab her left arm and pull her up. She turned to face her husband, the rage in his eyes noticeable to all the women. His right hand grabbed her wedding and engagement rings, and he pulled them off her left hand. "My rings," she cried. "Well, you are no longer my wife, so today you can go have fun," he said, throwing the rings over the roof onto the street in front of their house. "Go have fun with your boy with great dignity," he shouted, shaking with anger and rage. "I heard everything. I knew you weren't very good at bachelorette parties, but I couldn't believe you were in a relationship with some loser from a bar." Diana fell onto the concrete, crying. Steph stood up first and tried to console Jackson. "Cool down, Jackson. She really didn't do anything wrong." "Nonsense," he replied. "You all knew what would happen when you started taking her to parties, especially you, Steph." He pointed his index finger at her. "Since you're all here, help this pack her things and get them out of my house now." Cheryl smiled and tried to control her husband. "Come on, you can't be serious." She gently put her hand on his chest, but he pushed her, and she stumbled and fell backwards into the pool. "I'll be gone for an hour, and when I come back, I don't want her in my house." "Guess what? Steph has a new roommate," Jackson said before going into the house. He then came back through the door and said, "I heard you too, and I'm looking forward to our dates. But know that I won't have a night with you until the divorce is final. These won't be your friends anymore. Isn't that unacceptable to you?" Beck stood up proudly. "No, not at all." She couldn't help but smile. She had learned from her past mistakes, and was confident that she had a chance with Jackson. A week later, she got her wish at Friday's bachelorette party. She watched as Diana greeted her boyfriend, knowing he was one of those men who preyed on married women. She felt guilty for not trying to stop Diana, but she knew that once Diana made up her mind, there was no changing it. Diana didn't dance with her boyfriend that night. She looked at her friends and said she'd see them later. With that, she greeted the man, and they turned and left the club. In a small, unkempt apartment, Diana felt butterflies in her stomach. This was the first man she had been with other than Jackson in 21 years. "Undress me," he demanded. As she reached for his fly, he noticed her wedding ring was missing. "Put on the rings. I want to see them in your hand when you touch me," he said. Diana replied, "I cannot. Jackson took them when he kicked me out of the house last weekend." The man suddenly lost interest in her. He realized she was no longer married, and therefore not as appealing to him. Maybe Beck is right, and he only wanted to have a night with me because I'm married, Diana thought. "Don't you want to make love to me?" she asked. He looked at her and said, "Here's the thing. Tonight, I'll give you what you want. You want him, and I know it. But after we have him, you have to leave. I'm not interested in you hanging around here, trying to be my girlfriend. And I'm not your boyfriend. I seduce married women because I don't need affection." With those words, he grinned and took off his pants, throwing them on the sofa. He unbuttoned his shirt and added it to his trousers. He wasn't as fit as Jackson, but Diana didn't care. She knew what she wanted. She knelt in front of him, but after a few minutes, he pushed her away and led her to his bed. She began to take off her clothes as quickly as she could, and now she stood without clothes in front of him. He pushed her backwards onto the unmade bed. "I know you liked it." He smiled at her before going into the bathroom and closing the door. Diana felt sad and disappointed. Sure, it was big, but the experience reminded her of her first time disappointing. As she drove back to Steph's apartment, she noted that it had only been an hour since she left the club with him. If she had a night with Jackson, she would be lying in his arms, basking in the afterglow of lovemaking. She could go back to the club and meet the girls, but she felt sad and lonely. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she took an Uber back to Steph's empty apartment. Jackson, meanwhile, spent a week preparing for his new life. Some people might call him cold, but that's how he dealt with problems. He knew that Diana would be served at work on Monday. He wasn't vindictive in his proposed settlement. They had been together for over 20 years, and she had been a good wife and mother to their son until she decided she deserved slumber party time. Jackson drove 2 hours to have dinner with their son on his college campus, wanting to tell him about the divorce man-to-man. After dinner, Steph asked Diana about her night with her lover. "Was everything as you thought it would be?" she asked. Diana replied, "I was disappointed. After Candace's lustful tales and Steph's stories of her exciting life as a single woman, I thought I was going to have the best night of my life. But I was wrong." Steph insisted that Diana needed the right partner and suggested 2 men she was dating. Both men knew about each other's existence, and Steph was confident she could talk them into a night of debauchery. The 2 couples dined and danced before returning to Steph's apartment. Steph chose one of the 2 men, but her other choice was more than happy to have Diana. They lounged on the sofa, and he was a good kisser. Diana responded to his touch, but when she said no, he ignored her. She was soon disappointed. Is this my future? Incomplete pleasure with men who seem to only want pleasure for themselves without regard for my pleasure? She thought. She wriggled out from under him and went to the bathroom to shower. She felt dirty. She had been with 2 different men in 2 nights, both of which were disappointing. The water felt nice, and as she lathered up, a cool breeze told her that someone had entered the shower with her. He grabbed her chest from behind and said, "Hey, baby. I love it in the shower. Do you like having it in the shower?" He pulled her towards him, but she couldn't push him away. She reached behind the shower curtain, looking for something to use to pull him away from her. Her fingers found a soap dish on the windowsill. She grabbed it with her left hand and smashed it on his head. The soap dish shattered into dozens of small pieces, and he fell to the shower floor, stunned. Diana climbed over him and stood on the toilet seat, screaming for Steph. Meanwhile, Jackson was fast asleep on the couch. He had been sleeping there ever since he kicked Diana out. He could sleep in their bed, but he couldn't forget that she might have had other lovers in their bed. He woke up from a knock on the front door. He hesitantly walked towards the door, wearing only boxers and a t-shirt. If he had looked through the peephole, he would not have opened the door. Standing there was Candace, the queen of debauchery. Physically, Candace was a beauty, but Jackson always thought of her as a wormy apple, beautiful on the outside but rotten on the inside. It was already past 1 a.m, and she was standing there in a little black dress. "What do you want?" Jackson asked, frowning. Candace smiled her seductive smile and said, "I thought you might need some good intimacy, and I'd be happy to help." She lightly ran her fingers over his face, across his chest, and down. "Very good, Jax. It will be wonderful," she said. "Never in my life," Jackson said, removing her hand. "Go home. It will not happen." Candace looked disappointed but smiled to herself as she walked back to her car. On Sunday morning, Jackson did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He cleaned himself up and went to church. He was raised Baptist, but wasn't sure he wanted to listen to a fire and brimstone preacher. He chose a non-denominational church a few miles away and arrived a few minutes before the service began. The sermon was about allowing God to help you become the best person you can be so you can help others. Jackson felt touched and often felt like he wasn't doing enough for others. He decided he should become a mentor to young people and teach them to be successful by leading by example. He felt very good until he returned home and saw Diana sitting on the steps. She jumped up and started screaming at him. "Where have you been?" "I called. I came to you, and my keys don't work. The access code to the garage doesn't work either." Jackson calmly replied, "If you really want to know, I went to church. Maybe instead of whining, you should find a church. I'm sure there are men in the church you can have a night with." Diana followed him inside and started saying that she wanted to go home, that she couldn't live with Steph, and that her lifestyle was unproductive. "No, you can't live here. I freed you from the oath that you were going to break anyway. If you haven't already, by the way, what was the intimacy that you just had to have?" Jackson asked. Diana didn't finish. She wanted to say she didn't like it, but Jackson finished for her. "Don't lie. I've known you for too long, and I can tell that you've had this since you left here. There is no turning back." Diana's thoughts went back to last year when she told Jackson she wanted to go to a bachelorette party with her friend. He bluntly stated that it would lead to her cheating on their marriage. He told her that it was wrong for married ladies to act like single women, and that it would only lead to trouble. This trouble could affect his business, as his clients might find out and take their business elsewhere. Diana tried to hug him, but he stopped her. "Tomorrow, I'll ask Tracy, my new assistant, to make a list of safe apartments you can afford. I'll ask her to email them to your work email. From there, you can pick up your bedroom furniture and everything else you want," Jackson said. Diana cried, saying she couldn't live on what she earned and that he must help her. "You never needed to work. I earn a lot of money, but you wanted a job. You've saved $0, and you're blowing your paycheck as fast as you get it. You can't do this anymore. Being divorced, you will have to balance the budget. There are many families living on less than you earn," Jackson said. He walked her outside to the car and said, "You will be served on Wednesday at work unless you want to go to my office on Tuesday to be served quietly." Diana received the documents, although she hoped that Jackson would not divorce her. She had lived with him for more than 20 years and always got her way. Suddenly, she knew that the Jackson who loved her was different from the Jackson who decided not to love her. Alcohol was flowing freely at Cheryl's house on Wednesday night. The girls gathered to cheer Diana up, but they were drinking too much too fast without food. When Candace walked through the front door with a bottle of wine and a bottle of Jack Daniels, tongues loosened. Candace announced that she was going to seduce Jackson, and the tipsy ladies burst into laughter. Cheryl suggested that Beck should try first, but Candace stood up and ran her hands over her toned body, saying, "Does she really think her mommy body can compete with this?" Candace admitted that she had tried to seduce Jackson, but that he had rebuffed her. "What are you thinking about, Diana? I think I could marry Jackson and never have to work again. I could have plenty of intimacy with him and live comfortably," Candace said, grinning. For the first time, Diana began to realize what she had done. Meanwhile, Jackson opened the front door to reveal Beck and her children. Beck was holding a casserole dish in her hands and said, "Thought you might need a friend tonight." They ate on the terrace, and after the meal, Beck and Jackson talked about everything that had happened since he told Diana to leave. "I'm sure you know the others, who are with her now, to help deal with the shock of today's service." "I would like to be with you," Beck said. She didn't stay long, but before leaving, she kissed Jackson tenderly on the lips. He smiled as their lips parted, a seductive kiss that lasted just the right amount of time. Jackson woke up sometime between 1:30 and 2 a.m. to a drunk call from Diana. She alternately cried and scolded him, saying, "How could you do this to me? Don't you love me?" Jackson hung up, but she called back. After the third ring, he disconnected the call. "We'll call her tomorrow when she sobers up," he thought. Jackson waited until 11 o'clock before calling her. She didn't apologize for the calls, but instead wanted to go home. "No, I know that you had a night with other men, so our marriage is over. You couldn't even wait to be served before having fun." "I hope you got everything you hoped for," Jackson said. He heard a knock on the door and looked up to see Beck with a paper bag in her hands. "Hey, give me a second to end the call," he said, exhaling. "Diana, you wanted other men, and I'm giving you the life of a single divorced woman, which is what you obviously want. So sign the papers. If you don't meet Tracy tomorrow, I'll sort out the apartment issue for you myself. I will pay the first 2 months of rent. That's all. I have to go. Beck just surprised me with lunch." He turned off the call. By 6 o'clock in the evening, Stephanie was tired of listening to Diana. "Girl, you have to give it up. Beck isn't stealing your man. You don't want to hear it, but you were the one who wanted to try that guy, and you got him." What did Jackson get? He realized that he didn't have what his wife of 20-some years wanted, Stephanie said. Diana didn't want to hear it, but Stephanie continued, "You should be glad he doesn't know about the other things you did. Change into something nice, and let's cheer you up." 2 weeks passed, and Diana had several new and disappointing lovers. On Monday night after work, Bert and Cheryl took Diana to see the apartment Jackson had rented for her. He had furnished the apartment with furniture from the master bedroom and all her favorite things from home. Everything was freshly painted and cleaned, and the refrigerator was full. Bert brought her clothes into the apartment and hung up what needed hanging. He opened the plastic containers that held folded clothes and left to return with food. They spent the evening with Diana so Cheryl could ease her loneliness on her first night in the apartment. Cheryl knew that Diana was trying to drag out the divorce in the hope that Jackson would suddenly miss her so much that he would forgive her and take her back to her fairy tale life. Cheryl suggested having a housewarming bachelorette party at Diana's new apartment on Friday. Beck answered the call and agreed to come. She hadn't seen Diana for several weeks and wanted to check on her. Jackson looked forward to dinners with Beck. He knew from their friendship that she rarely left her office for lunch. He enjoyed her company and was the only one of Diana's friends that he liked. He tolerated the others to keep the peace. While having lunch with Jackson on Thursday, Beck asked if he would watch her kids so she could go to Diana's housewarming. He agreed, and they made plans for him to take the kids to the baseball fields and go-kart racing. Beck didn't have to drop the kids off because Jackson showed up and took them. He enjoyed spending time with them and missed playing basketball with his son. These guys helped him fill that void. When Beck arrived at Diana's apartment, she saw Cheryl and Steph with their glasses of wine raised. Candace pushed past her into the room, and there was tension between Beck and Diana. After drinking wine and whiskey, tongues loosened, and Candace suggested that they all help Diana get back with Jackson. This hurt Beck inside because she had real feelings for Jackson. A tipsy Candace told the girls that Diana couldn't get him back until she had slept with him. She described Jackson in graphic detail, and Beck called her out for talking like that. Candace replied, "Oh, that's right. Little Mommy has plans for Jax. Do you think you can get him? Mommy needs a daddy for her children, and he is an empty nester. Why should he raise your children?" Before Beck could argue with Candace, Diana pulled back her hair and shouted at her, "Stay away from my husband, Beck. He's mine, so get away from him. I saw you leaving his office several times when I drove by during lunch." Diana pushed Beck towards the door, and Beck expressed her thoughts to her friends for the first time. "Cold. I understood everything, Diana. But he is no longer yours. You threw him away, preferring other men to him. He doesn't deserve this. Remember, I know how many men you please below the belt at bachelorette parties. Steph says you've tried a lot of men since you moved in with her." Beck continued, "Cheryl, you think you can have a boyfriend anytime because Bert knows his wife is taller than him. But cheating is not okay. I learned this the hard way. You never had children because you didn't want a mom body, but it's an honor you'll never know. No, Steph is so shallow that she will never marry. No man needs a woman like you. Of course, they will invite you on dates with the obligatory continuation, but they don't need you for anything else. And Candace, if every man you had slept with could stick out of your body like a needle, you'd look like a porcupine." Beck left, slamming the door. She went home and sat in her empty apartment for half an hour. The boys were with Jackson, and she didn't want to be alone. She took out her phone and dialed Jackson's number. He told her to come down because their turn at the baseball practice booth would be in half an hour. He joked that his fifth place hurt after go-karting. She found Jackson and her children in the outfield baseball booth. She sat down on a bench behind the fence, and Jackson smiled when he saw her watching them. He motioned for her to come inside and silently handed her a baseball helmet. She shook her head, but the children insisted. She swung for innings, missing every one of them. Jackson slid behind her and took the bat off her shoulder. He told her to bend her knees and helped her swing for the next pitch. To her surprise, she hit the ball. She felt safe with Jackson pressed against her from behind, helping her prepare for her swing. She felt her pulse begin to quicken, and she never managed to hit the ball on her own. But it was the most fun she'd had in years, and she laughed until she cried. Jackson smiled as he followed Beck's car to her apartment. He helped her get the boys and carry their things into the apartment. He asked if she wanted to have breakfast with him the next morning, and she agreed. While driving back home, he received a message from Bert. The girls had left Diana's apartment to go to the club, and they ended up in the sobering station. Bert told Jackson that he decided they needed a lesson and did not pull them out. Looks like drunk driving increased your insurance, he thought. He wondered if Diana was the driver. Over breakfast, Jackson and Beck continued to bond as a couple. She told him about the previous evening at Diana's and what she said there. He thought it was funny that she told him off and wondered why she left so early. He hoped she did it for his sake, knowing it was selfish. He wanted to be honest with her. I'll be honest with you. Last night when I held you in the batting cage, it felt right. I think maybe you felt it too, he said. Beck nodded in agreement. I felt safe and protected, she said, blushing. To be honest, I already fell in love with you many years ago. Well, I think I'm in love with you. I know that you were married, but I will wait for you as long as necessary. She dug into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I know I have a story, and you know what it is. The day you kicked her out, I said I would do anything to be with you. I knew you would need something specific to show my intentions. The following Monday, I got tested for STDs. You will see that I'm clean. I haven't had sex with a man for over a year. Jackson was proud of her honesty. Beck, I know you made mistakes. I was there in the days before your divorce, and I saw the regret. I knew that you were always a good person. But I still didn't understand why you continued nightly dates when it led to divorce. Beck looked down. You don't understand now, and I hope you never understand. But when you're divorced and with children, you can't date. But you want to feel loved, even when you know that you're not right. But just right now, I could find a better man. Why did you allow Diana to go on overnight dates with you? Jackson asked. He knew she would be truthful. She reached across the table and took his hands. I tried to convince her not to do it. But you know that if she wants something, it will happen. Although I had no intention of leaving with men, I knew that I had to be there to help her not make the same mistakes that I made. Jackson smiled. You seem to suck at this job. They held hands across the table, and he spoke honestly to her. I feel like we have a connection. And that day on the terrace when I said that I would date you, I was serious. You've always been the best of her friends, and I enjoy our conversations. I look forward to our lunches and phone calls. You tell me off when I say stupid things and make me laugh. You're also a great mom. Beck looked worried. Since we're being honest, I feel the same way. But look at me. I'm not like others. I don't go to the gym. I get judged for my mom's body. I don't have money for this. It's hard to feed 3 teenage boys with what I get. Child support doesn't even cover their food. Jackson squeezed her hands with his. You look great. You are beautiful and curvy. I like curvy ones. I can't wait to see those curves. The waitress brought their check, and he took it from the table. So, do you have any plans for today? Beck pressed her whole body against him and kissed him lightly on the lips. Well, there's something I haven't done for a long time. It's been over a year now. Jackson stood in his underpants and looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He was about to have sex with the first woman in 25 years other than his soon-to-be ex-wife. After he found out that Diana was unfaithful, he felt insecure. Beck seemed like a hot woman to him. His father would have said, volume in those places where it should be. He took a deep breath and opened the door, expecting to find her sitting on the bed waiting for him. He was surprised to find her lying under the covers, pulled up to her chin. Jackson was slightly disappointed. He wanted to turn her around and tell her so. As he pulled back the top covers and moved into Beck's bed, he said, "You can turn me around another time when I feel more comfortable. This is something new for me, and I don't want you to be disappointed in my body." Jackson pressed his body against her without clothes. The warmth of her full, large chest felt exciting on his skin. "You can never disappoint me with your body, no matter what. The ex looks like that for herself, not for me. Because I've always been turned on by curvy girls." He placed his right hand on her left leg and slowly moved it along her thigh and up to her underchest area. He returned it to her hip and moved it down, touching her plump fifth place. He leaned down and kissed her for the first time. Their breath caught in their throats as they kissed, exploring each other tenderly until the warmth building below them grew into flames. Their kisses became more passionate, as if they wanted to devour each other. She rolled onto her back, and he threw his right leg over her, holding her up as they continued to kiss passionately. His right hand moved up her soft belly, over a rib cage to her ample chest. Her right hand touched his stomach as she reached down to his boxers and found what she was looking for. Exhausted, she collapsed onto his chest, breathing heavily. It had been too long since she had done something like this, or rather, not like that. She had never had anything like this. Her ex and most of the men she dated after her divorce never tried to please her. These men, including her ex, only wanted pleasure for themselves. She knew that this was what men wanted, but it never gave her pleasure. Jackson put her on top of him and hugged her tightly. He would always cherish this moment. He felt like a man again. He didn't understand what Diana had done to him, but he knew it had an effect on him. He continued to hug her as they both drifted off to sleep. Jackson was the first to wake up. He looked at Rebecca lovingly. His mind transformed her. Beck was Diana's friend. Beck was a fun girl, but Rebecca was the mature woman he thought he might fall in love with. He enjoyed spending time with her and her boys. He had no idea how much he missed being a father. He kissed her, waking her up. "Rebecca," he said for the first time, "I don't know where this will lead, but I don't want to see any other women but you. I can't assume you feel the same way, but I'd love it if you did." She kissed him. "I wouldn't want anything better." Rebecca smiled until she saw the alarm clock. "Oh, it's already been more than an hour. The boys will be worried." She got out of bed, and Jackson saw her body for the first time. He was pleased. She may have thought she was overweight, but he thought she was perfect. "Can I use your shower?" she asked. "Of course," he said, thinking about joining her in the shower. But he knew that being a mother was more important at this moment. He didn't stop her from getting dressed but walked her to the car and kissed her. "I would like you to bring the boys in a couple of hours. I want to be sure that they don't mind the fact that I'm dating their mom." Rebecca returned with her sons and found Jackson at the grill, cooking hamburgers. Potato salad, beans, and relish were on the table. After they ate, Jackson pulled the boys aside. "Guys, I want to talk to you like men. I really like your mom, and I would like to date her romantically if that's okay with you. It's important that you approve because I really like you too. Can I date your mom?" The three boys looked at each other. No man had ever asked them such a question before. The two younger ones looked at their older brother and nodded. The eldest son, the owner of the house, looked at Jackson. "Yes, sir. We would like that." Jackson stood up and hugged them. He heard the younger one ask, "Will you be our new dad?" He hugged them even tighter. "If that's what you want, I'd be honored." Rebecca began to cry as she watched this happen. Her boys needed a man in their lives just as much as she did. A man who would be a good example for young people when they grow up. She reached for a tissue to wipe away her tears as she watched the younger one grab a basketball from the closet and run towards the basketball court. Jackson and his brothers waited to play a regular game of doubles. As she was putting away a trash bag filled with scraps from their meal, Rebecca heard the doorbell ring. "Jackson, someone is at your door," she said while playing basketball. He didn't hear her. She wiped her hands on a kitchen towel, walked through the patio doors into the house, and headed for the front door. The bell rang again as she opened the door to meet Diana. Rebecca fell on her back as Diana pushed her into the house. "What are you doing in my house, Dee?" Diana growled at her. Rebecca stood up and pushed Diana back a step. "This is not your house anymore. This is Jackson's house. You live in an apartment on Richard Street. Remember how you kicked me out last night?" Diana walked past Beck, looking for Jackson. "Where's my husband? I spent the whole night in prison. He had to come and get me out." Rebecca rushed to intercept Diana, who came face to face with her. "Why do you think he had to get you out of prison? It's his responsibility?" "No, It's not his responsibility to get you out of the sobering center. It's your responsibility not to get arrested for public drinking. Take responsibility for your life, Beck said, angry at her old friend. Diana rushed from room to room, but Rebecca stayed behind her. I know why you are here, but it won't work. You left him, and I'm trying to be there for him so that he doesn't go into the darkness that my ex went into. Rebecca put her hands on her hips and looked into Diana's eyes. You were where I was 3 years ago. You screwed up and lost your husband because you did stupid things a married woman shouldn't do. And you will pay the price for it. Loneliness is a hard price to pay. Every evening, I return home to a cold, quiet apartment, never again to hear the sweet, gentle sounds of a loving husband and children. I'm lucky to have children, but your son is grown up, and your husband is divorcing you. It will be hard because you will be lonely, and a 45-year-old sitting at home on weekday evenings while you wait for Friday and Saturday evenings when you can find some man, anyone who will warm your bed. Diana cried. I'm so stupid. You're so right. He is wonderful, and he is the best lover I have ever had. I forgot about it. I thought I'd have an adventure. He'd never know about it, and I'd get to try something better, that intimacy that happens once in a lifetime. Diana paused. I already had it. Beck walked to the patio door. Jackson is outside with the boys. I can go get him. Diana stood next to her friend and watched the basketball go through the hoop from Jackson's throw. He is a great father. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed watching him play basketball. She looked at her friend. Do you love him? Beck replied, yes. Diana announced, I want you to know that today was our first time. I don't know if he loves me as much as I love him. But if he chooses me, I will spend the rest of my life making him happy. We are both going through menopause in the near future, and I know it will change things. But Jackson seems like a man who will understand and find a way to make it work for us. Diana sobbed. I actually came here today to seduce him again, to make love to him one last time, even if it's miserable. If he makes love to you, it's over, and he's moving on. I know how he does everything. He wouldn't do this if I had the chance. Diana turned and walked back to the door. She stopped at the door and turned around. Tell him that I will find a lawyer and sign the papers. Rebecca told Jackson about Diana's visit and that her lawyer would contact his lawyer. He gathered her and the boys and sent them home. He kissed her tenderly and closed the car door. 7 months later, Diana asked for a short meeting with Jackson and his lawyer before they appeared before a judge. Jackson knew Diana needed some form of closure. She asked for forgiveness for being selfish and thoughtless, that she had forgotten how incredible he was, and that she regretted starting to hang out with girls, even though he never wanted her to do so. Diana, I tried to explain to you that married women cannot behave like unmarried women. I knew you weren't faithful to me at the bachelorette parties. You were always seen by someone you didn't notice. Over the years, I received photos and text messages from people who saw you in clubs and restaurants. But I chose to ignore it because I loved you. But enough is enough. Coming home that Saturday and hearing you talk about how you were going to get that guy, I knew it was all over for me. If you don't want me, then let him have you. Jackson got up. Have a nice life, Diana. You will always be a part of my life. We have a son, and there will be times like birthdays and holidays when we see each other. I will be polite and friendly. I will be available in case of emergency. But we will never sleep in the same bed again. I've always been a one-woman man, and that will never change. He closed the door behind him, and Diana burst into tears. What do you think of the situation or the current protagonist is in? Would you do the same? Write your opinion in the comments. See you in the next video.